Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax guys. Still feeling good from all the good stuff we talked about last week. All the candidate pledges and the candidate boot camp we were able to go to.
That was good.
If you did not see last week's episode, go back to FAIRtaxguys.com, look it up, and check this out. That was one of our better ones, I'll have to say.
Just as a reminder, we were invited to present to this symposium of future candidates, people who are some of them have announced, some of them are thinking of announcing running for Congress, and we were asked to come and talk about tax reform. And you notice that there wasn't anybody there talking about the income tax or the flat tax.
No, there wasn't.
We were the only ones there talking about real tax reform. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we got several people who approached us and said, I'm sold, what can I do? And we just happen to have some candidates' pledges with us.
Yes.
It was good.
So if you'd like to take a candidate pledge to a town hall, maybe a bit later in the year, it's kind of early to be doing this. But that's why it was so amazing that we got the one lady, Marissa Selvig, just out of the blue sent us, hey, I've signed the pledge.
Yep.
And then we got the 4 more. So this early in the election cycle, people are paying attention to the FAIRtax. But to go to fairtax.org, under Get Involved, there's a candidate pledge. You can actually download and print a hard copy of that to take to your candidate, and if you can get him to sign it, him or her to sign it, you can either send us still pictures or videos, and we'll feature them here on FAIRtax Power. We're going to have every so often we're just going to go ahead during this election cycle and run down the whole list of everybody who's signed the pledge. We want to give them, we can't endorse, but we do want to educate who has and who hasn't. But
I think Bob is right. I think the word is starting to get out more and more about the FAIRtax because they see the income tax become completely unwieldy. I was in the car today. I was listening to one of the talk show hosts on satellite radio, and he mentioned it too. So the media has been kind of silent on the FAIRtax, but this guy mentioned it.
Yeah, David Webb, he's a pretty high-profile media guy. So hopefully he's he kind of equated it FAIRtax or flat tax, kind of put it together. We need to make sure that folks understand that there is a world of difference between the two.
Yeah, for sure.
And but at least it's in the conversation in some places, so we'll try to do that.
Yep. So that's good. So
all right, can I dive in
now? Congress.gov.
Oh yeah.
If you go to Congress.gov and in the search bar type in quotes Internal Revenue Code and hit the little search button, you're going to get. And make sure that over on the side you get legislation only and the 117th Congress.
And if you do that, as of the day we're recording this, there are 511 hits. But you found out something the other day that was pretty cool. If you uncheck that thing, and by default, this thing, that goes back, what, to 1970,
73, 74?
You can look up legislation that far back. And if you look through all of that thing from 73 to above, how many hits do you get on that Internal Revenue Code search if you look back that far?
42,970.
Yikes.
Proposals to change the tax code. Of course, Debbie Stabenow from Michigan, she constantly has her municipal solid waste proposal in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, that hasn't showed up this year. We'll have to look at it and see. But this is this week's foray into Congress.gov. S1403. A bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for Move America bonds and Move America credits. Now, we don't have the text for this. I can't get in there and see what they're doing, but somehow I don't think they're really going to pick America up and move it someplace.
No, I wonder if that's some kind of a transportation bond, they want to...
That kind of sounds good. Of course, infrastructure is a hot topic in Washington now, so maybe that's
except that we've seen that infrastructure now has a very broad definition with the new people in Washington.
We'll not get into that, but anyway, they're going to provide the Move America bonds. I wonder if that's like the U.S. savings bonds I used to hear about when I was growing up.
That's what it says to me without any further explanation.
Move America bonds and Move America credits, that goes into the tax code. Let's see, let me go down a little bit farther. Here we go. This is S1387, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to repeal the credit for electricity produced from certain renewable resources. This one speaks to the instability in the tax code. They'll give you credit, then they'll take it away, then they'll give you credit, and then they'll take it away. And it probably largely depends on which party is in control of the government.
Yep, that's right.
If you're a friend of the administration, you get a credit, and then when the administration changes to the other side, they take it back.
Yeah.
But that's it. A bill
and it also speaks to the fact that they're using the tax code to attempt to modify the behavior of American citizens. It should be used just to raise revenue, but no, our Congress critters want to use it for everything else.
Yes, so the 1387 to repeal the credit for electricity produced from certain renewable resources. But again, people that were counting on getting that credit, and then they yank it out from under them.
Yeah.
And that's, oh, look what I found. You're a prophet, sir. S 1376, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to modify the definition of municipal solid waste. It's back.
And
that's Debbie Stabenow again.
Yet again, she's probably had that in there every single Congress since she's been in Congress.
But you're wondering if she puts it in every single Congress and it never passes and she keeps trying to get the same thing in, or if she's changing the definition every year.
Oh, that's an S bill, so she's in the Senate.
Yes, Debbie Stabenow from Michigan.
Okay.
So again, we've seen this in previous Congresses. So they want to modify the definition of municipal solid waste. Well, Jade will be happy. He mentioned that at the end of his webinar here a couple of weeks ago.
So you see,
so Jade, we're good. Senator Stabenow has got the definition of municipal solid waste. Now, actually, the definition has to be in there if she wants to change it.
Yeah.
So we have a tax code that does contain the definition of municipal solid waste. That really
she wants to modify it.
That really needs to go away. We need to get rid of garbage like that with a fair tax.
A lot of people, when they think about Congress, they do think of municipal solid waste.
I think I'll just go on if you don't mind. And the last one we've got here, HR 72, or check that, 2772, HR 2772, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to impose an excise tax on sugary drinks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. We people in Congress inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C., we know better, and we don't want you drinking these awful sugary drinks, and we're going to try to modify the tax code so that you can't drink your sugary drinks because you don't know what you're doing, and we know better for you.
Watch this.
And that is
Cheerwine.
Yep.
It's a soft drink that's produced in North Carolina. It's not available nationally, so there are probably some people, what in the heck is that? It's a cherry flavored soft drink. It's made in my home state of North Carolina, and I grew up drinking this stuff, and it's just really good. Yep. But they want to impose an excise tax on sugary drinks, but a lot of these things don't use sugar anymore. They use that high fructose corn syrup, Mr. Chemistry Teacher.
I got news for you.
Okay.
High fructose corn syrup is pretty much the same thing as sugar.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
glucose is just one half of a sucrose molecule.
Okay.
Sucrose
also, they want to dedicate the revenues from such a tax to the prevention, treatment, and research of diet-related health conditions in disproportionately affected populations. Not sure what that means. And, of course, for other purposes.
You know what I think they're going to find when they do all the research? Is that sugar is actually better for you than the artificial sweeteners.
Yes. I've heard some horror stories about what the artificial sweeteners do to you.
Yep.
So y'all, excuse me, I'm going to have some more Cheerwine. You can go ahead and see what you're going to do.
Okay. Well, are we done with Congress.gov? Yep.
For this week, yes.
Okay, for this week. All right. Well, we need to talk about, we're always talking about the FAIRtax and how the FAIRtax is much simpler, a much more fair system, a more equitable system, and it truly protects the poor from excessive taxation, okay? And here's a good example of what the current system is doing. All right, this is an article that I got it off of Fox Business website, April 23rd of this year, 2021, and it's by Megan Henney. Here's the title, and all we need to do is read the title. IRS holding over 29 million unprocessed tax returns, delaying refunds for many low-income Americans. All right. Now we hear constantly from the people in Congress they want to take care of the low-income Americans. They want to tax the rich, and they want to tax those evil corporations because they want to take care of the low-income Americans. However, there's millions of low-income Americans who have money coming back to them, their money that the federal government is hanging on to. But because the IRS is overwhelmed, not only with tax returns, but all the extra work that Congress has put on them because of the pandemic and the stimulus checks and things like that, the IRS is overwhelmed, and they've got 29 million refunds, or tax returns to go. Many of them with refunds. We can do better. Our citizens, whether they're high income, low income, middle income, deserve better. All right, this is nuts.
Yeah, imagine going into Walmart and making like a $15 purchase. You hand the lady a $20 bill, and you have to wait 15 days to get your change back.
That won't go over too well.
And that's basically what we're talking about with a tax refund. It is your money that you paid more than you actually owe, and you get back what was collected from you that you don't owe. It's just like getting change back.
Yeah.
But you have to fill out these hugely complicated forms to convince the government that you're entitled to get your own money back.
Yeah. And so compare that to the prebate, which when it's all set up, all right, the prebate is automatically sent to each legal household, and it's dependent on the number of people in the household, not on their income or their spending habits. Just the number of people automatically goes to them at the beginning of each month. Mm-hmm. No fuss, no muss, it's automatic, instead of this 29 million unprocessed tax returns that the IRS is having trouble getting to because they're overwhelmed with other work.
Why don't we just get rid of the IRS?
I think that's a dandy idea.
That's an excellent idea.
Yep. Well, get rid of the income tax, the IRS, make life simpler for all Americans, and just go to the FAIRtax. Let's do it. And you can help us by contacting your congressperson. If they are a co-sponsor, reward them. Thank them for being a co-sponsor. If they're not, get on their case. All right? You can use this article and say, why are we doing this? Why are you not co-sponsoring the FAIRtax? All right? Obviously, if you care about low-income Americans, you're going to sponsor the FAIRtax.
But Ron, the government cannot exist without an income tax.
Well, we have a number of states in the union that don't have an income tax, and they're doing very well.
How often do we hear that? You got to have an income tax. You can't have a government without it.
Yeah.
And you point to folks like, we live here in Florida. Of course, we have to pay the federal income tax like everybody else.
Right.
But we are one of a few states that has no state income tax.
That's right.
And our state's doing pretty good.
It's doing very well. In fact, there's this little thing about the census every 10 years. Mm-hmm. If you've been paying attention to the news lately, you know that the census released their data. And guess what? Some states lost representative because they lost population, all right? And some states gained representatives in Congress because they gained. I heard Governor DeSantis say that there's about 1,000 people a day moving to Florida.
That's why Florida's +1. We get we get one more.
That's right. That's right.
One more electoral vote, and that's one more, representative in the House of Representatives.
Yep. And
people are coming to Florida, and no state income tax is a good reason that a lot of these people are doing that.
Yep. And we've used this paper before that I wrote up over a year ago, and I've got on the top here, I've got the states with no income tax: Alaska, Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. Now, of that list, all right, Florida picked up one House representative in the House. Texas picked up 2. The others stayed even. Now down below I've got a list of the 9 states with the highest state income tax, and we had 2 states that lost a representative because they're losing people. We actually had one. I was surprised. Oregon picked up a representative, so the Oregon must be doing something right because they do have a high state income tax. But
second highest in the country.
Yeah, but they probably doing some other things like cutting back on their regulations and stuff like that. All right.
California at the top of the list, 13.3% state income tax on top of what Uncle Sam takes.
And I'm not sure if that's up to date. It could be more than that now.
It could be more than that. And guess what? They lost one. People are saying, enough of this. I'm out of here.
Yep. And New York, and you know what a basket case New York is. I mean, I've had, my wife and I.
You know all about it. You used to live there.
I used to live there. I've got 2 sons that live up there. One of them is desperately trying to find a job elsewhere. And 2 of our grandchildren said, I've had enough in New York. They're now here in Florida. So the move is on. So we've got states that with high income tax that have lost representation because they're losing people. And we've got states with no income tax that are gaining people. People vote with their feet. And so the census speaks.
Extend that to a global scale here.
Yeah.
What happens if the United States gets rid of their income tax, particularly their corporate income tax?
Yeah.
Do you think people will want to leave, or do you think people think big international corporations that bring millions of jobs with them, will they want to come here, or will that continue to drive American business overseas?
Well, we got a partial answer in 2018. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
That was not tax reform, that was tax relief.
Right, but it was passed. It did bring the corporate tax rate down, the repatriation tax rate down, brought some other things down, and they made it easier to do business and less expensive to do business here in this country, and we saw companies start to come back. And I'll use the example again. Apple put a bunch of money in here. They built a new chip plant, and their newest laptops are actually their desktops too, are being built with the chip that's made here in this country with U.S. workers.
Yeah, okay? I just got a new Apple phone here. Do you think their chip is in there?
Yep,
Probably.
Absolutely. Yep.
And on the flip side of that, you've seen these tax increases have not even been implemented yet, but the current administration is talking about draconian tax increases on corporations.
Yeah.
And Ford has already announced that the plant that they were going to build here, they've changed their mind. They're going to Mexico. So again, if you want to have a strong economy, if you want to have a lot of the fair tax is probably the best jobs bill that you could ever write.
Yeah, it is. And you already mentioned Jade Walley's webinar of a couple of weeks ago. You know, when the fair tax passes, some of the other positive things that happen. That's
go back and check that out. That's a bit longer than our normal 30-minute FTPR episodes here. But Jade is well worth listening to. We got a comment on the YouTube channel that says, "This guy's good. He knows what he's talking about."
That's right. So, thanks to Carlos for that.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So anyways,
what I'd like to do here, we mentioned also, you got something you want to do first, the Bill of Rights?
Nope. Okay. Go right ahead.
We mentioned that we had gone out to this candidate boot camp symposium to speak to potential candidates about the fair tax. And so just kind of go back to Fair Tax 101.
Yeah.
Explain to them just some really basic things about the fair tax that we haven't touched on here on Fair Tax Power Radio in quite a while. So I kind of wanted to go back and just bring folks up to speed who may be new to this thing, what we're really talking about. The fair tax, the biggest, boldest, brashest, most out-of-the-box tax reform idea ever proposed. You mentioned the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. You heard those kind of superlatives being thrown around relative to that act. But again, I love what Carrie Bowers said about that. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act took a system based on personal and corporate income taxes along with federal payroll taxes administered and enforced by the IRS and transformed that into a system of personal and corporate income taxes, federal payroll taxes administered and enforced by the IRS. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was not tax reform. They went in and tweaked some parameters within the system, and what they did certainly was positive. We mentioned that as well, but it was not tax reform. The fair tax is true tax reform.
Oh, yes. I mean,
And-
it really reforms the tax code because it gets rid of the current tax code. Totally wipes out the income tax lock, stock, and barrel. All right?
Yeah, but what people need to understand, this is actual legislation. This is not just some, theoretical abstract in the back of some economist's mind or something that somebody scribbled on the back of a dinner napkin. This has been up there, an actual legislative proposal. We go to Congress.gov every week here on FAIRtax Power Radio. You can go to Congress.gov, look up HR 25, and read the bill for yourself. It's there in legislative language, and it's been there for quite a while. But again, this is actual legislation. You can go to PopVox, which we encourage people to do. Go to PopVox, POPVOX. You can register your opinion of HR 25. Hopefully it's a good one. And we need to encourage folks to do that because we need to see a lot of numbers. The percentage is fantastic. The number of people that oppose it versus the number of people that support it. It's well over 95%. Last time we looked, that's how many people support the fair tax versus those who oppose it. But the numbers aren't that high. We need to fix that.
Yep.
But anyway, again, it's actual legislation. And the beauty of this fair tax is that it was designed. Name me another tax reform proposal that was not written by politicians.
Can't think of any.
The fair tax was designed exclusively in the private sector by private economists. There were these rather wealthy business people out in Houston, Texas, that had spent the entire day really talking over, trying to discuss strategy, how they wanted to move their companies forward. And they realized at the end of the day that they had spent like 80% of their time talking about tax consequences rather than actually how to move your business forward. And these guys had the money to do it. They said, all right, let's hire us a team of economists and see if they can design a tax system that will raise the same amount of money that the government's currently getting now, which is not enough to match spending, but that's another issue there. But raise the same amount of money for the government that they're currently getting out of the income tax, but do it in a better way. They gave these economists a blank sheet of paper and says, have at it. And what they came up with came to be known as the fair tax. It wasn't called that right out of the box. But
Right.
this was completely and totally designed by the private sector. There is nothing in the fair tax that's there because it advances some guy's political agenda or hinders the other guy's political agenda. It is strictly the team of economists' design of the best tax system they could possibly come up with. That is, and no other tax reform proposal can even come close to making that kind of claim.
No. And I want to remind people, Bob mentioned that the legislation is like 130 pages. Well, we don't expect you to read 130 pages of legalese. And Carrie Bowers has done a nice thing for us, all right? He has, and several weeks ago, we had an episode based on, well, actually 2 episodes, all right? Carrie Bowers took the 133 pages, condensed it down to 13 pages, and you can get that PDF if you go to fairtax.org, click Get Involved, all right, and come down to the toolbox. And in the toolbox under printed materials, the first item is the Fair Tax Act of 2021, HR 25 summary by Carrie Bowers. You can click that, download it, and that is a great summary of the Fair Tax Act, written in language that everybody can understand.
Yeah, but you got to understand that 130 some pages, a lot of that refers to current statutes, current legislation that has been passed into law, current law, that is repealed.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the Fair Tax Act, it can't touch the Constitution. We've still got to repeal the 16th Amendment through the normal constitutional amendment process.
That's right.
The Fair Tax gives you a 7-year window to accomplish that before it is permanently implemented. But on the day the fair tax is enacted, all of the current statutory authority to collect an income tax goes away.
Yep.
And of course, theoretically, Congress could go back and put it back if they'd pass it and the president sign it, but I don't think it'll take more than a couple of months of people getting their entire paycheck, getting their prebate every month. Nobody is going to want to go back to the income tax except the lobbyists and the Congress critters that are profiting handsomely from the current system.
Yep.
But the people aren't going to like that. But anyway, and we mentioned these this team of economists that designed the FAIRtax, they didn't just meet for a couple of hours on one afternoon and come up with something. They spent over $20 million of these Houston businessmen's money trying to figure out how this is going to work, researching how it's going to work, figuring out the rate has to be, and just going through this thing stem to stern to make sure that their creation would work as advertised. $20 million worth of research. And how many times, Ron, do you hear a politician say, well, I like the FAIRtax, but it needs more study?
Yes, I have heard that before.
In that case, you know you're dealing with a mealy-mouthed weasel in that case, who wants you to think that he supports you and stands for your cause, but he's giving himself an out so he doesn't have to do a doggone thing when it comes to delivering on the goods, you know.
Yeah, because when somebody says that, you say, all right, well, how much more than $20 million in research do you think it needs?
Yeah, it's undoubtedly the FAIRtax, the most thoroughly researched tax reform proposal ever. And I can go out on a limb here and say the FAIRtax is probably the most thoroughly researched legislative proposal of any kind ever.
Yep.
I mean, name me another piece of legislation that has $20 million worth of private research behind it guaranteeing that it's going to work. And that's what we're talking about. That's why we're so passionate about the FAIRtax, wanting to get it done.
Yeah, I don't think there's any legislation that has this much work behind it.
Yeah, it's been described as the greatest transfer of power from the government to the people, which is probably why the swamp rats up there have killed it every year for the past 20 years.
Oh yeah, they're terrified of this.
We got about,
some of them, the career politicians.
Yeah, we got about 3 minutes left. You wanted to get it. You got the Bill of Rights there that you want to get into.
Well, no, that's just part of my
just sitting
stuff.
there.
I think I do want to remind people that when because there's a lot of talk about raising the corporate tax, all right, like that's going to solve all our problems. All right, keep in mind the portion of federal revenues that comes from the corporate tax is not 50%, it's not 25%, it's not 15%. In 2018, it was 8%, okay? 8% corporate tax. Oh, I beg your pardon. In 2018, it was 6%. 6%. So raising the corporate tax is going to raise prices on everything.
Absolutely.
Right?
Including the people that the president says he's not going to raise taxes
yes.
on. He may not raise taxes on you, but he's going to make your life more expensive by making everything you buy more expensive, because the companies and the corporations that produce the things that you need are going to have to write a bigger check to the U.S. Treasury.
Yeah. So
it's crazy. That's something people really don't understand.
Yeah. So
taxes and the compliance costs that come with them, just like any other cost of doing business, just like the cost of labor and materials, the end consumer pays for it all.
Yep, that's right. But there's still people in Washington that think that the corporate tax is their big cash cow and they're going to solve all their problems by raising the corporate tax. It's very ill-advised. All right, on our call to action, what do we got here?
Oh, let's see. One thing we haven't talked to in quite a while, contact the whitehouse.gov.
Oh, yeah.
whitehouse.gov/contact.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might not get a very cordial reception, but anyway, get in there and tell them.
Yeah.
Tell them that you don't like the income tax. The income tax is killing things, and just encourage them to get behind it. They might not do it, but at least it wouldn't hurt to have your voice heard.
And if a number of people keep writing to them, maybe they'll get the message, all right? So,
we did mention popvox.com. Do that there, and you give them your name and address so that they know what congressional district you're in. Mm-hmm. That's all they need that information for. And anything that you write there goes to your congressional representatives.
Yeah, that's right. And we've mentioned FAIRtax.org, the website of the national group. Don't forget FAIRtax.org/1040, in which you would commit to sending them $10.40 each month. Those recurring donations are very important for this national group. They have big expenses.
Indeed. And share these videos. Let your family and friends see all about FAIRtax Power Radio. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition. Thank you again so much for watching and listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
We are the FAIRtax guys, reminding you again that the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it. Thank you. Follow the FAIRtax guys on social media and their own website, FAIRtaxguys.com, and check back every week for a new episode of FAIRtax Power Radio.